Hello and welcome back to the Agenda podcast here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay, and I'm joined today for a debut on the Agenda by Richard Garnett. And we are going to be looking into Liverpool's summer rebuild project. That's pretty much what we're looking at now at this point. Obviously, a better result last night for the Reds, but a lot of issues still needing to be solved. We'll start with, I don't expect this to be an issue, Rich, but are you expecting Jurgen Klopp to stick around for the rebuild? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk recently about that 7-year trend with Dortmund and Mainz, and I think he's in his 8th year with the Reds now, but he's spoken at length in recent press conferences in the embargo about his plans for the future, and obviously only signed a contract extension last year. Obviously, there's no chance he's going to be jumping ship and he'll be sticking around for the rebuild, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any concerns there whatsoever. He didn't sign a new contract lightly, and if anything, we've learned from Jurgen Klopp over the last however many years it's been, so 6 or 7 years, is that he's a loyal individual with an important emphasis on personal values, and that has been reflected by him right the way through his managerial tenureship at Liverpool, and was something that he took into account when he signed the new contract. Obviously, there's some other forces at play that do need to be considered, such as when he signed the contract, he obviously didn't know that FSG were going to put the club up for sale or look for additional investment. But I don't think that really detracts too much from the situation. He signed the contract with Liverpool. It's not going to be for a small amount of money, is it? So I'm sure he'll have no trouble seeing that out. But yeah, there's no worries on that front.
Yeah, and you mentioned FSG in the sale there, and I wanted to come on to that, obviously, because if we are going to be going into a rebuild, Jurgen Klopp's going to need to be given the means to rebuild his squad. Jamie Carragher on Sky a couple of weeks ago saying he reckoned around 200 to 250 million pounds is needed. Is he going to get that from FSG, given they're looking now more likely to be looking for investors rather than a full sale?
Well, the problem you've got is we're in a period of uncertainty around a number of things. Uncertainty on who he might ship out and who he might bring in, and uncertainty over what sort of war chest he'll actually have to deal with. I mean, there was some talk last week, wasn't there, about there being 2 separate budget plans. One if FSG gets an investor or sells the club, and one if they don't. I mean, I think it's quite hard to be able to plan for that, especially the one if they do sell the club, because there are so many mitigating factors around that, not least who actually buys the club and what sort of money they're prepared to give him, because that won't necessarily be a decision of FSG's, depending on what the makeup of the deal is. So it's difficult to say, but what is certain now is that if Liverpool are going to keep pace with Manchester City and the emerging force of Newcastle United, they're going to have to spend a lot of money, and probably more than they have done in recent years. And that would be less prevalent if Liverpool were top of the league right now and looking like world beaters. Well, I'm afraid they're looking anything but that at the moment. So, yeah, I think regardless of whether there's new owners around the table come August, Liverpool are still going to have to spend the money if they want to compete. Otherwise, you are looking at a couple of years in the wilderness.
Yeah, and obviously, if they're going to get that money, a lot of Liverpool's transfer business in recent years has been based on a sort of sell to buy. You look at Coutinho going to Barcelona, and that's what was the catalyst for Alisson and Van Dijk coming in. We're going to start by looking at the midfield, and we'll take a look at who could be exiting first. 3 names spring to mind off the top of my head. Naby Keita, James Milner, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, but it's not looking too likely, is it, Richard, that they're going to be getting any money in for any of those 3 players?
No, and I suppose in that sense it kind of goes away against FSG's operating model, or how they've been successful in the transfer market over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. Naby Keita definitely looks like a player who's just running down his contract, and Oxlade-Chamberlain, his time is up, and whether James Milner gets another honorary extension his never-ending Liverpool career remains to be seen. But even if he does, he's not going to be at the forefront of first team selection, I don't think. So no real money to be made there. I was having a conversation about this just beforehand, because if you're overhauling a midfield, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Milner, none of those players are regular first team starters this season. Your regulars are more Firmino, Henderson, Thiago, if you want to take the senior pros or the names that are always under consideration. So you could have a situation, if you changed them and Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Milner, well, there's 6 midfielders. Just seems quite drastic, doesn't it? It's not very likely that that's going to happen. So there's a bit of a problem there, and unless there is a cash injection or FSG are willing to, as I say, sanction more funds for Klopp outside the usual remit, one of the big names is probably going to have to go, and who that is remains to be seen. It could well be which of those players would probably get the best resale value. I'm not too sure on contract lengths, but if you look at the ages of the players, you probably, out of those 3, you're probably looking at Firmino as the one that could probably recoup the biggest transfer fee, I would imagine. But is there an appetite there for him to move him on and bring someone else in to play that role? I don't know. It's a serious question. Obviously, his form hasn't been great this season by any stretch. And we've just seen had a little insight yesterday in what the future could hold in the shape of Stefan Bajcetic. That's not to say that he would be the successor, but there could be a life after Fabinho. Sorry, I said Firmino. Apologies, Fabinho. I mean, get my F's mixed up. We've seen a hint of the future in the base of that midfield of who could come in and do that role if you didn't go out and spend the money on a player. But it's difficult, because if you don't change any of those of that central 3, you're only really changing the window dressing around the sides, aren't you? So he's got tough decisions to make. He said this week that he's not overly loyal to players. He'd be prepared to call some names, and I think maybe he could be one of the big names that goes.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Bajcetic briefly, just on the kind of midfielders you think Jurgen Klopp might need to be bringing in. Obviously, a lot of people I've spoken to mentioning that we might need maybe not a direct replacement for Fabinho, but a backup number 6. Do you think Bajcetic is good enough to be that backup number 6, or do you think Liverpool will look to go into the market for
that? I don't think I've seen enough of him to be able to say, yeah, he's your man as a backup. What I would say, though, is if Liverpool were to dip into the market and spend a fair whack of money on a player for that sort of position, it's probably not going to be as a backup, but more as a replacement for Fabinho. And if that's the case, he may feel that Bajcetic is good enough to play that second fiddle, to play that supporting role. And if he continues in the same vein of form as he did yesterday, then that's great, and that will save Liverpool a bit of money. But I can't see them spending. If money's tight and you need to spend quite a bit of money to overhaul a midfield, I can't see them doing it just to bring in a backup.
Yeah, and I think most people speak to a lot of fans saying it's definitely not just 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 midfielders that Liverpool need to be looking to bring in the summer. And obviously, people wouldn't turn down a January signing, I don't think. Rich, what kind of midfielders, what profile of midfielder do you think Liverpool are going to be looking at in the summer?
Well, what they're looking at and why might be 2 different things, but they need runners. There's no energy in there, is there? It hasn't been good enough. It was a little bit better for 45 minutes last night. A lot of that coming from the front, to be fair, and energy from the likes of Harvey Elliott. But generally speaking, this season there's been such a drop off in terms of energy in midfield that it is alarming. And whether that is just the necessity to inject new blood in there, we'll have to leave that to the judgment of Jurgen Klopp. But I think if you're planning on playing in the same way that he has, which deep down I think is probably what he really wants to do. He's got his tried and trusted 4-3-3 formation. It's been successful for him. He's got very good fullbacks who might not have hit the heights of previous seasons this year, but I don't think there's any danger of either of them being replaced. That puts the focus on assists and what have you coming from those wide areas and from whoever he has in his front three. So, but the energy in the team needs to be brought back to life, and I think players like Moises Caicedo at Brighton and anyone who it doesn't necessarily have to be ball players as such, you know what I mean, as long as people are good in possession, but people who can just bring drive and energy to that part of the field so that Liverpool can start playing higher up the pitch. Because, I know it's the worst example, and it's probably the worst you've seen Liverpool play for quite some time, but that performance against Brighton, too much of it was played in their own half. They just couldn't get out of there, and it all comes down to not having the energy and not being able to get around the pitch to press higher up and play in the areas where Liverpool should be, really. So definitely players who are going to bring that spark and energy, and a few Duracell bunnies, won't go amiss.
Yeah, and one name that springs to mind, of course, we can't really talk about Liverpool's summer recruitment without touching on the prospect of signing Jude Bellingham. Obviously, only 19 years old. He's definitely of that mould of a Duracell bunny, bring plenty of energy and youth to that Liverpool midfield. But I ask most people this on the pod, whereabouts on the barometer of likely to unlikely are you sitting on the Jude Bellingham to Liverpool at the moment?
I hate to be boring, but probably right in the middle. I honestly think it's that that uncertain. There's a lot of, come back to uncertainty. I've just been writing a piece about that today. There's a lot of uncertainty around at the moment. No one really likes uncertainty, do they? Because it's hard to make calculations and projections on things. But if Liverpool finish 8th in the Premier League, unless there's a gentleman's agreement and on the lowdown, Jude Bellingham is committed to coming to Liverpool Football Club, regardless of where they finish in the table, then it would be difficult to see why he would join a side that wouldn't be competing in Europe or wouldn't be in the Champions League, when he knows full well he can basically have his pick of clubs, and they'll have Real Madrid waiting there to take him. It'd be very difficult to turn that down, wouldn't it? But I would love Jude Bellingham to come. I do have reservations, though, over how much he would cost. And if you put all your eggs in one basket with Jude Bellingham, at what price is that to an overhaul of the other areas of the team that need improvement, not least the other midfield roles, because I feel like we've seen enough of this current midfield to know that it's pretty unlikely that it's ever going to get back to what it was before. So it's going to take more than just one player in the engine room to get Liverpool competing with the likes of Newcastle and Manchester City. So it's in the balance at the moment. Come on, Jude. Don't worry about the money. Strike a deal and get yourself to Anfield. But not at the detriment of bringing in other players that they might need.
Yeah, I would suspect that if Bellingham is Anfield bound, it'll probably be Bellingham and another in midfield rather than 3 players coming in because of the money that he would cost. But we'll move on to the forward line now. Obviously, seems to have been prioritised over the midfield in January with Cody Gakpo having come in. A lot of people arguing that transfer wasn't needed and that they should have prioritised midfielder. I'm not sure about wasn't needed, because I don't think anybody wants to be seeing Oxlade-Chamberlain starting 3 games in a row in that attacking left position. So I think Gakpo was needed. But do you think there's any argument that Liverpool might need to bring in another forward in the summer as well?
If Roberto Firmino goes, then there's probably an argument there. But I guess some of it comes down to what the long-term prognosis is for Diogo Jota and Luis Diaz, because if you've got all of those players fit, Diaz is in your side without question. Mo Salah's in your side. and then you've got Jota and Gakpo and Nunes to battle over those positions. And I think you're going to have a job keeping all of those players satisfied. I think it is difficult for Gakpo to come in at this juncture. We've already seen the adaptation that Darwin Núñez has had to make to this Liverpool team, which, whether we like it or not, is now in a period of transition. Life after Mane, it's not been an easy adjustment for the team, and Núñez has had his work cut out. Yeah, I think he's pretty much getting there now. It doesn't feel like too long until the goals are going to start going in for Núñez, based purely on the chances that he's getting and the work rate that he's putting in as well. There's no lack of application there. So if you bring another forward in, what you need to have a pretty defined purpose as to what you want them for. And I think the only reason that might happen is if Liverpool simply don't deliver enough goals between now and the end of the season. If they don't, then that might send alarm bells ringing. You may even see one shipped out, who knows, to try and offset the cost. Who that would be, I don't know. Not too sure. Can't see it being Núñez. And it certainly won't be Luis Diaz. So I don't know what you do there. But of course, Jurgen Klopp said he wants Roberto Firmino to stay. That probably gives him the right balance up top. But if he does go, then there may be an opportunity there. But if you look at some of the other players that he's got, Elliott, Carvalho, even Ben Doak on the fringes now, particularly the first two, they don't have defined roles in this Liverpool team yet. What are they? Are they forwards? Are they midfielders? Where's their best positions? That doesn't seem nailed down yet. So if you are looking to mix things up a bit up front, that I think there's still opportunities to explore there. It's just how much time Jurgen Klopp's prepared to give them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if Firmino stays, and I'd be more than happy with him getting, another year. I think he sort of earned it with how much he pulled us through before that World Cup break. He was pretty much the only guy scoring goals. So yeah, I think I'd be more than happy for Firmino to stay for another year, and we could go this summer without.
It's another experienced player as well. You know what I mean? Especially when you're needing to sort of overhaul certain parts of the team. You don't want to rid yourself of your experienced players too quickly, especially ones with exceptional know-how like Roberto Firmino. But he may decide that he's done a decent stint at Liverpool. He's seen Sadio Mane move on and other players come in, and he may well decide that it's time for him to move on and maybe start a new chapter. And let's be honest, who could blame him?
Yeah, I think he'd be going with the well wishes of all the Liverpool fan base there. But we'll touch on the defence just before we finish. It's something that I hadn't really considered myself until very recently. We had a story we covered on one of the Transfer Daily streams about Josko Gvardiol hinting that it was his dream club, Liverpool. Used to watch him with his dad when he was a kid. And it came right around the same time as Van Dijk having a bit of a shocking first half against Brentford. And then he comes off and we find out he's out for about a month. And it's just maybe made me start to think, is it time to start thinking of a life after Virgil van Dijk and time to start looking about maybe getting a long-term successor in?
If you look at the defenders that Liverpool have got on paper, I would probably say no. But things change very quickly in football, don't they? And injuries take the toll. And he suffered a particularly bad one in his Liverpool career. So the long-term or the longevity of Virgil van Dijk is something that could be questioned. And the only way we're going to see that is by judging it on things like how long it takes him to recover, and what are his performance levels like when he comes back into the team. Because he's still, at the end of the day, he's still Liverpool's first choice centre-back, and I'm yet to see a serious challenger to that role. We've got a great centre-back in Konate, who enjoyed a good World Cup and kind of just edged his way back in, hasn't he, since he's come back from Qatar. Obviously, he's had a bit of a break in terms of almost being secured a first-team place by Virgil van Dijk being injured. alongside Matip. Otherwise, he would have been vying with Matip for that role, I think. I don't see Joe Gomez as being a long-term answer there, more of a squad player as far as I'm concerned. And heading king Nat Phillips will probably move on eventually at the end of the season, I would imagine. So there may be some scope there, but whether you went for a big name to come in or not, I don't think it's necessarily a pressing concern at this moment. I think the getting a grip of the midfield situation has got to be the priority. And I'm sure if they can get the right names in there, and if you are able to get Bellingham and one other in to kind of get a grip of that situation, then it may be that the focus on the defence becomes marginalised a little bit. That's the hope anyway.
Yeah, I think we're all expecting the midfield to be the main area of focus in summer. Maybe hopefully in January a bit as well. Liverpool could maybe still get a bit of business done, even though Jurgen Klopp seems to be suggesting it's not going to happen. But that is all we've got time for here on the agenda today. So, Rich, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers, Ed. Thank you.